Everybody knows that. Anytime you go somewhere.
We're all ready to go. Good evening. We're learning Maseches Nedarim Daf Ayin, and we're starting 3 lines from the bottom on Samach Tes Amud Beis. We've been discussing some of the languages of an Av or a Baal in regards to the neder that a wife or daughter makes. So let's say, again, the chronological order is that a woman makes a neder and her father and or, depending on the circumstances, the father and or the Baal can either be mefer, they can undo the neder, or they can be mekim, they can support the neder. And yesterday we asked a couple of questions about different languages, and here we have a 4-tiered question. Each question is, here's my question, options A or B. If B, then what about X? And if within X it's 1 or 2, if 2, then what about, right? So that's the structure. It's a tree of questions. And then we're going to answer none of that because the Gemara can't bring a conclusion for some strange reason. Let's get started. The Gemara starts 3 lines from the bottom on Samach Tes Amud Beis, Boy Rabba. If a person says after he hears the neder, Kayim lichi hayom, I support your neder, but only for today. So therefore, by definition, there's an implication that tomorrow I'm no longer supportive of your neder. So mahu, what do? Do we look at that inference and say it's etched in stone, or do we say the inference is not relevant? Mi amrinan kimanda amar la mufar lichi machar. Do we say that the inference, it's as if you said it, that, okay, well, kayim lichi hayom, I support you today, and tomorrow mufar lichi machar, I really reject your neder starting tomorrow morning. Odilma, or perhaps the diuk should not be expressed. Halo amar la, he never said it, and therefore, really, the whole thing is mekuyam. And the word that makes no sense here is hayom. We just ignore it, and we just assume that it's mekuyam. No problem at all. Those are the 2 options. And at the top of Ayin Amud Aleph, we split this yet again. Im tim salomar halo amar. If we are of the opinion that when a person says kayim lichi hayom, we do not make the diuk, and we say that the whole neder is mekuyam. So then what if what he said wasn't kayim lichi hayom? Im amar la, not im, but amar la, if he would have instead said mufar lichi lemachar. Let's say he would have only said the diuk line. I hereby reject your statement as of tomorrow morning. Mahu. Mi amrinan, do we say that lemachar lamati mefer dehakaima lenidre hayom? His silence over day 1, the first 24 hours, he never said boo about her neder. That has a subtle implication that he supports her neder over the course of that time. Do we say that lo matzi mefer dehakaima lenidre hayom? O dilma, or perhaps Kevan delo amar la kaim lichi hayom, because he never expressly said that on day 1 I support your neder. Kika amar la mufra lichi lemachar, when he actually says I am unsupporting your neder tomorrow. Mehayom ka'amar. That really what we're saying is that the hafara applies the whole time. This is a hard question of the Gemara, but that's how the Gemara splits this up. We want to figure out what happens if you say mufar lichi lemachar, and those are the two different options. And the Gemara splits it a third time. 5 lines down on Ayin Amud Aleph. If you want to say, in fact, that the neder is mekuyam, because kevan dekaimo hayom, because on day 1 it was mekuyam, because he didn't say anything. Lemachar kamandi isei dami, and therefore it's as if the neder was mekuyam even on day 2. Well, what if a person said on day 1, kayim lichi l'shah, I hereby support your neder for the next 60 minutes. Right? We're really trying to find that line in the sand, the threshold by which we say your words matter. And what does the Gemara say about this? Mi amrinan, do we say that the phrase of kayim lichi l'shah is kiman de amarla, similar to mufi lichi la'achar shah, the inference of kayim lichi l'shah, I support you from 11 to 12, but starting at 12, I'm going to undo your neder. Do we say that diuk of mufar lichi la'achar shah is valid? O dilma halo amarla, he really didn't say that, and really all that he said was kayim lichi shah, and the word shah becomes irrelevant, and really the whole neder is mekuyam. And we have to ignore the word because there's no other way to explain it. We don't know the answer to this question, but either we ignore the word or we don't. So it's the Gemara saying, and even if you say X, even if you say that we ignore that word, another Tim Tzalomar question is going to come up. So if it's like, remember Rabbi Haskell in the yeshiva used to draw flowcharts on the board. And we had to sit there with the Gemara with our chavros and figure out what was the question, what were the 2 answers. So you have a question with 2 possibilities, and the Gemara says, and even if this is true, what about the next case? And even if that's true, what about the next case? So that's the structure. It's not that We don't know the answer to the question yet. It could be that the word hayom is not relevant, and it could be that it is relevant. We don't know yet. And here's the fourth layer of the Imtim Salomar, a third of the way down on Ayin Amar Aleph. And Imtim Salomar, Halo Amar La, that he did not actually say Mufar Lichi La'achar Shah. Mihu, what if he did? Amar La, if he would have said that Mufar Lichi La'achar Shah, if he would have said that in 1 hour I'm going to undo your neder, mai. Do we say Mian Rina that since in the first hour he was silent, Kevan de Kaimo, that it's going to be a definite neder that you were makuyim because you were silent in the first hour? O Dilma, or perhaps Kevan de Kule Yoma, because the whole first day is Bar Hakama Uvar Hafarahu. Throughout that day, he can set any conditions that he wants about Hakama and Hafar. He can say hour 1, you can do what you said, and hour 2, I undo it. So then, maybe it would actually work under those circumstances. So these are all of the questions that we have here. To summarize all of the questions, we're really struggling with whether or not if a person makes statement X, can we make an inference on his statement and have it be binding? That's really what we're saying over here. It's a little bit trying to get into his head. What was he actually thinking? Even though the Gemara doesn't say that we ask him, we're trying to understand. For example, let's just review one of them. If I say that this is Mekuyam until tomorrow, so what do the words until tomorrow actually mean in halachic terminology? Does it mean that therefore tomorrow it's hafara? He never said that. So how far do we take his comment? We have these questions all the time in halacha, and even in dialogue, in human dialogue, we assume inferences all the time. It's normal. But here we're just not sure. And the Gemara presumes for whatever reason not to ask him. But if a person says, Kaimi lichi hayom, I hereby support your neder for this day. So do we or do we not accept the inference of, and therefore tomorrow I'm going to undo your neder? Right?
I mean, so does hafara require a misa?
No.
So, and then in this case, then it will be a pashtus that it's over the next day. Because if you don't have to say the words on Mayfair the neder.
Oh, you have to say something. Oh, not at that moment. You don't have to say that. So what you're saying, Kaimi lichi hayom.
Right.
She makes a neder 9 a.m. You hear about it at 9:05 a.m. or you're there when she says it. And then you say, Kaimi lichi hayom. I'm supporting your neder today. What did he mean? Did he mean that therefore by tomorrow, this is all within the 24-hour window? That's correct. We're discussing what happened. His comments now are in the 24-hour window. That's correct. Hafara has to be done within 24 hours. That was inferred in yesterday's Gemara, but we didn't really articulate it.
It's two different things when you make that one statement. It's not even like a logical thing to say. I understand what Tyson is saying. You all think it's one way, but it could be somebody's thinking the exact opposite.
No. I changed what I said because if you need to do and you need to say the hafar, then that's different than what I was.
You don't need to say the hafar.
What you said, though.
100%. 100%. It's a little odd to me. I've already hinted to this. It's a little odd that the Gemara doesn't actually follow his ratzon. Like we're guessing. We're postulating. We're just ask. Well, okay. Obviously, there's a reason why we can't, or that it's irrelevant. Okay. It may just be that. Let's say it this way. Let's say he made the comment, and then 24 hours later, now we're there. Okay, no corrections can be made now. So he already said the comment, and Bezdin says we don't care about your kavanah right now. Your comment was made then. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe we don't care about his kavanah then because Rav Shibbolei being right.
Could be that's Rav Shibbolei. It could be. It could be.
The problem is,
but every
when you make a statement that's unclear, it's never from Shibbolei. You make a contradictory statement. What are you saying?
Correct. I mean, we discussed this yesterday when he says, mufar lichi and kaimi lichi and then mufar lichi in the same sentence. So, but the Gemara says that we were concerned about what they said, even though they're inherently contradictory, but the words were said. So like there's a mechanics piece here of like you actually did something. So as we analyze these words, we're just not sure how to take the inferences. Do we say that the inferences are kodesh and therefore they apply, or do we not? To that, the Gemara responds halfway down. Tashma, if a woman says, Hareini Nazira, she says about herself that she would like to be a Nazira. V'shama Baila, her husband heard her say that. V'amar, and he said, Va'ani. and I. So what's the din? Ein yochel lahafer. After he says that he too will be a Nazir, he can no longer go back and be mefer the Nazirus of his wife. Because his neder is riding on the wave. The language in the Meforshim is that it's tofes on her neder. You can't say va'ani and make yourself into a Nazir based on her comment, if her comment is mufar, if her comment was undone, if her neder was taken apart. So therefore, if the Baal is going to say va'ani, and it really, in fact, makes him into a Nazir, by definition, he can't be mefer her Nazirus, because that would then undo his Nazirus. So the fact that he said va'ani is the raya that he supported her Nazirus. Says the Gemara, ve'amai, why is that true? Nema, perhaps we should say va'ani, that the husband's acceptance of I also want to be a Nazir was the amarhu, and al nafshe the havi nazir, and it was only about him that there was nazirus. Aval hareini nazira, but when it comes to her and her commitment to be a nazira, dila desha achas kaima. Maybe it's only sha achas. How could this work? A woman wakes up in the morning, natilas yadayim. She walks down into the kitchen and says, hareini nazira, and the husband says, va'ani, and then he says, your neder's only mekuyam for 1 hour. You're only a nazira for an hour. That way, we're able to work things out perfectly. He can hold on to his nazirus because it was nitfas in the first hour of her nazirus, but her nazirus ends after an hour because we're allowed to say that it's only for a shah. And after an hour, he's able to undo her nazirus.
So like,
Yeah, that's
right. Above here is like, you say vid ani, or you just said ani, like.
Va'ani, and me.
Right. I'm saying if a person just says ani after the woman says it, I wouldn't even know if I would run to say that.
What does that mean? It just means
I'm taking it upon my time.
You're saying ani versus va'ani?
Yes, the Bob itself is making me do things.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Is nothing.
Right.
Well,
Is nothing. What's your point?
my point is that.
It's nothing.
Okay, no, I mean, that mean I'm taking the juice. Just what do you mean?
You're not.
Stan, you're a parent. Have you ever walked into a room and your kids poured I don't know, chocolate syrup in the carpet, and you walk in, you're like, and you just turn around and walk out? You ever have these parental experiences? Oh, wow. Okay. No shidduchim between our children. Okay, good. Got it. Understood.
No. What I'm saying is, she says, I'm enough, right? And he says.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's what he said. That's what he said. But what the Gemara is recommending now is that we know that her nazirus has to be chal at least a little bit. Because otherwise, if her nazirus isn't chal, then his va'ani is on a house of cards. It has to be an authentic neder. So what the Gemara says is that why didn't we recommend that her nazirus only lasted shah achas? Why couldn't it be that she had a minimum, whatever, she had something, and then let him be mefer? Why did we not? And the Gemara then says, it must be that by virtue of the fact that he let it start, he now cannot undo it, which goes back to all 4 layers of our questions before and says the inferences don't matter because whatever started, and you can't come back after it starts and say, wait, I have a diuk. Nobody cares about your diuk anymore because once it starts, it starts. So the Gemara is trying to give this one answer, threading the needle of all 4 questions to say that the diukim don't matter. And the Gemara responds low. No. Come on, it was so close. It's a really good approach. It's a good answer. Low. Why? Because kasavar, we hold kol, quote, va'ani, end quote. Whenever we see this language of and me or me too, it's kiman de'omar kaim lichi le'olam dami. When you say va'ani to someone else's neder, that's the strongest kiyum of their neder. And there's no way to undo it. You cannot backtrack. So what the Gemara is saying is, when we say va'ani, that case has its own specific rules. The rule of va'ani, you make a neder and I say va'ani, there's no such thing as hafara in those cases. The va'ani is so strong, it validates your nazirus ol meyad. Done. However, if he didn't say va'ani, or if he said va'ani under the conditions of hafara, maybe it would have been different. We don't know. But va'ani in a vacuum, no room for latitude, and therefore we don't have an answer to our question. We thought we had an answer to our question. We thought that obviously it must be the v'chol kaimo, what's the language? Dekeva dekaimo kayim. That makes perfect sense. But because the case was va'ani and the rules of va'ani are very strict, so therefore we don't have an answer to our question. And the Gemara doesn't try anymore. It leaves all four layers of our questions completely unanswered. Which should be a little bit terrifying halachically, because that means that if we were to say something that had an inference with our Nedarim, so would it be a neder d'oraisa or would it be mutter? And we don't know the answer to that. Based on Shas, we don't know the answer to that question. Yes. You just quoted two books that I don't think I've ever opened. Try again. The Rugged Shaver. According to the Safnas Paneach, what? Okay, that's yeah, we call this false humility. So the Safnas Paneach, what does he say?
2 lines.
Read it. 2 lines I can handle.
According to this understanding, it emerges that a temporary confirmation does not prevent the husband from revoking the neder afterwards. Probably, I am knowledge, inquires about this point and leaves the inquiry unresolved. Sefnus Barnett notes that Yerushalmi stand on the matter goes even further than Bavli's inquiry. For Bavli inquires only whether one may still revoke after a temporary confirmation. Yerushalmi, however, not only allows the revocation to take place, but maintains that the revocation is actually inherent in the wording of the confirmation itself. Wow.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's his language.
I wonder what it's like.
We'll have to look this up. Well, we have to look up not the va'ani din. We have to look up each level of the shaila. So last time you said 2 lines, it was a paragraph.
Yeah.
So the aleph here is it's Reish Lamed Daled Mem Hey. There's a bunch of Rambams here.
It's one line.
It's only one line.
I'll let it go. So that's against the Yerushalmi. That means that our Gemara, now we have to see the Rishonim. I mean, we're not going to look now, but the Nosei Kelim, is that a Chumrah? Is that a Safek? Like what happened in Bavli that we just left this answer unanswered? We have no direction. Yeah, in Achanami. And there are some rules with Imtim Salomar questions also in regards to the Rambam. So I don't know all of them, but okay, good, great. I'm glad to, yeah. Wow. The Tzafnas Panech in English is not as bad as it is in Hebrew. Okay. The Mishnah writes 3/4 of the way down. This one we've already seen pieces of. Meis Ha'av, in a scenario where a father of the Na'ara Me'urasa dies, Lo Nisrokna Rishus Labal. The husband, the Baal, doesn't have all of the same rights to be Mefer and Neder as the father does. Meis Habal, however, if the Arus dies, Nisrokna Rishus La'av. In other words, we see the following. We see that, and we've already inferred this from previous Gemaras, that it seems to be that the koach of the Av is greater than the koach of the Baal. Not crazy, because she's falling back, Beis Avia Binureha, she's falling back to her father's house. And the Mishnah also adds, B'davar acher yafeh koach habal mi koach ha'av. There is one area where the Arus has more power than even the father. What's that case scenario? Sha'ba'al mefer b'bagar. That a Baal is able to be mefer after a girl is older than 12 years and 6 months. Then only she can be mefer. V'ha'av eina mefer b'bagar. He is not able to be mefer and neder on his daughter once she becomes a bogeres. 12 and a half. So the Gemara asks 4 lines from the bottom, my taima. What is the reason why this is true? To Amar Kra, bini ureha beisaviha. But in regards to a bogeres, the father doesn't have afar. That's only bini ureha when she's a na'ara me'urasa, not when she's a bogeres. So it's a diuk from the psukim, and the psukim seem to indicate that if she's a bogeres, the father has no control. In other words, the father's entire capacity to be mefer his daughter's neder, all the psukim and chumash, it's a 6-month span. I guess it's up to 12 and a half. It's up to 12 and a half. Things are different before she's 12 too, I'm sure, even if she's engaged. Then she's not a nara. Then they're different psukim altogether. Okay. We had said in our Mishnah that meis habal nisrokna rishus la'av, that if the arus dies, then the responsibilities of hafaras nadarim fall back on the father mid nalan. Where do we know this from? Amar Rabba or Amar Rava. The Amar Kra, V'im hayosihye leish undareha aleha. Double language of hayosihye, and the Gemara makes a drasha on the top. I should say the Gemara makes a hekesh on the top of Ayin Amud Beis. We'll be going to the last word on the page. Tomorrow's blot, short Gemara, very long run. Which means short Gemara. For those of you who are in the Daf Yomi world. So the Gemara has a beautiful hekesh on the double language. Makish kod me havaya shnia, lekod me havaya rishona. Says the Gemara that if a woman's husband died or a woman's arus died, so post his death, she is just like she would have been before they were married. That's what the Gemara says. That makish kod me havaya shnia, a woman after her first husband dies and before she marries another person, that's similar to havaya rishona. Ma kod me havaya rishona av mefer lechude. Just like a father, before his daughter marries the first time, the father can be mefer by himself. Av kod me havaya shnia, even after the Baal, the Arus dies, before the second husband, av mefer lechude. Okay. So this comes to answer the din that if the Arus dies, and we understand why Nisrokna la'ab, why all the defaults fall back to the father, that he can be made for the neder, because we have a hekesh and psukim. Just like before she married her first husband, her father could have been made for neder lechude by himself. So too before she would marry her second husband, i.e. after her first husband dies, the Arus dies, then there too, same rules apply. She could have 10 husbands, one dying right after the other, and in between all the husbands, then falls back to the father. And that's based on this pasuk. Ema says the Gemara, maybe we would argue 4 lines down on Ayin Amud Beis, Hani Mili, maybe this is only true b'nedarim shelo niru la'arus. Maybe it's only true by nedarim that the arus never knew about. Namely, they weren't there weren't any of these nedarim made in his lifespan while they were together. Aval maybe b'nedarim sheniru la'arus lo matzi mefer av. Maybe if it was a neder that was made while they were engaged, halachically engaged, maybe if he then dies, the father cannot be mefer neder in such a case. As the Gemara, not correct. Even nedarim shelo niru la'arus. If we're talking about nedarim that the arus never saw, we don't need an extra pasuk for that. That we already know. So Elamai, it must be that the chiddush over here is pretty significant, is that even if, let's say, they got engaged on January 1st and he died on January 10th and she made a neder in his presence on January 5th. So that's something that the arus saw. He saw that this neder was made and then he died. Havamina, that maybe the father doesn't have the capacity to undo that neder. Incorrect. He absolutely does have the capacity to do that. That brings us to the next 2 dots, which is a third of the way down. We had said,
What is her ability as a 12-year-old, up to 12 now, to make a good neder in the first place? Does she have a right to?
She's a bas mitzvah. What's the problem?
There's no change from 12 and a half before 12 and a half, for being able to cancel it because she's now in a different stage.
You're saying a Nara Murasa case or just Stam?
Yeah.
Nara Murasa, she's just she's just totally kafuf to the Baal.
The father or the Baal and the Baal.
Yeah, I mean, at least we haven't seen it so far that she has any strength of her own to undo anything.
I think what you said is right. She's bas mitzvah.
It works, but is what we're saying that a woman never has the capacity to do she'ela on her own nedarim?
She'ela and hafara.
I know. Well, hafara, she can't do it for herself, but can she do she'ela? I don't know.
That's a whole different.
Right? Yeah, correct.
The assumption of this case is any of the hafara cases, she's fine with it. It's them.
Yeah.
To undo it, even if she might not want.
Right.
And who has the power to do it?
Right. That's been our discussion for the last many days. Right?
And close to nefesh that are in the
But didn't the Gemara say that?
So then my question is, what about other nedarim, which I guess the Baal would have power over, and then my second question is then with the Av also wouldn't have power over, and then.
Didn't we just have a case of Nazirus? That's not Beino Lebeino. That's her restrictions for wine.
Or drink wine, so see it's got fish.
It's at least very, the one says it's very in the nefesh because.
Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom.
The height in the liver, the history is bedune, therefore it's very in the nefesh. That basically it's an inner nefesh for her because she's might not get Laura when she dies. And Hester when she died, based on fact, she's not able to do time mace. That's what the Gemara says.
Yeah, but I was saying that it's not Beino Levino, but David and you were both saying it doesn't matter. It's still Inu
It's
Nefesh.
an inner nefesh. Inner nefesh is more common than Beino Levino. In regards to the din of them being able to be made, so it's definitely be able to make for inner nefesh.
Yeah, I don't know. Any other day.
Okay, so.
Here we go. We what?
We're continuing?
Oh, you took a nap there, Michael, for a minute? Come join the conversation.
Everybody.
Come join the conversation. Just join the conversation, Michael. I'd love to have you. Says the Gemara, because we had said that the father has more capacity to be mefer neder than the Baal. Hechidami, what's the case? If she got engaged, halachically betrothed while she was 12, but before 12 and a half, and then she became 12 and a half, and now she's a bogeres, michti, let's analyze. We know that Misa is Motzia, and we know that Bagrus is Motzia Mirishus Sa'ab. The things that take her out of the Rishus Sa'ab is death and Bagrus. So Ma Misa lo nisrakna Rishus Labal, just like death doesn't give over the father's capacity of hafara to the Baal, af Bagrus lo nisrokna Rishus Labal, then Bagrus also wouldn't do that. So that can't be the case. Ella, it must be halfway down. Shekitchak shehi bogeres. The case we must be talking about is a case where she got halachically engaged once she was already 13. Says the Gemara, that's not a chiddush at all, because hatanina chadazimna, we already learned this. Habogeres sheshasa yud beis chodesh. If there's a bogeres that waits 12 months, and if we see the Mari Makomos over there, then the Baal can be mefer. We already learned about that. If she was kitchak shehi bogeres. So the Gemara now, before it answers this question, interrupts with a problem. The Gemara says, wait 1 second, Hagufa Kasha. That line of Habogeres Sheshasa is not so simple. Amris, you said Habogeres Sheshasa Shnei Masar Chodesh Bebogeres. If she waited 12 months after her engagement before she got married as a 12 and a half year old or older, Lama li Shnei Masar Chodesh. But for her, why would we be waiting 12 months? Bogeres Belamed Yom Sagila, even only 1 month is sufficient. Says the Gemara, technical answer, you're right. Tani bogeres v'sheshasa yud beis chodesh. 2 cases. One is a case of a bogeres who could only be 30 days. And the other is a case of sheshasa yud beis chodesh, who isn't a bogeres, who's a nara. So says the Gemara, mikom makom kasha. The kasha still stands. Why do we have 2 mari makomos? We have our Mishnah, and we have the Mishnah that we just brought over here of habogeres sheshasa yud beis chodesh. Why do we need 2 of them to teach us the same din? Ibai Sema, 2 answers, and then we'll stop. The Gemara says, Hacha Dafka, our case, our Mishnah is Iker, and the case of Ubogeres, that case was Ketani Hasan was only taught Mishum Debai Ifluge Rebelazar Verabana to highlight a machlokes Rebelazar Verabana, but our Gemara is really Iker. And Ibai Sema Bogeres Dafka, and if you want to say that the Mishnah about Bogeres is the one that's most specific, that's fine. And since in the beginning of the Mishnah we highlighted that the father had a particular strength, we just like the poetry and symmetry of Mishnah is Nasiv Seifa Nami Bazeh. We also have a concluding part of the Mishnah that says there's also a strength to the Baal sometimes about Bogeres. Afalpi that it's repetitive, but we just wanted to make sure that the Mishnah was symmetrical. We'll stop right here and pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night with Daf Ayin Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
I have a